the Office of Government Property. I am Christos Vidalakis. I'm the head of property sustainability at the Office of Government Property, OGP. This is the second session of a series of webinars looking into various aspects of decarbonisation. As I said, I will provide a very short background, and then the MEP team will take over with the main session. I understand that some of you, probably plenty, attended the first workshop yesterday, so I will try not to repeat myself too much. OGP's role is to provide leadership across the government property function, and the webinars, this series of webinars, is part of our effort to strengthen capability in the area of sustainability. Over the last 2 years, Modern Energy Partners have worked with several major government departments towards net zero decarbonisation, and I think delivered some exceptional results. These webinars is probably the perfect opportunity for them to share their experience and for us to learn from their expertise. My view is that attending one of the workshops is good, but attending more of the series would be even better. This is because the sessions cover a wide range of aspects related to decarbonising the state. Yesterday we looked at planning, getting funded, and writing the business case. Today we will be moving on to the detail of delivery. And I believe that it is important to understand the whole process, because this is the only way to better appreciate the opportunities and the challenges. So I think these webinars is a great opportunity for all of us. Some basic logistics information, exactly the same as yesterday. The webinar, the presentation part is being recorded. There will be a feedback and evaluation survey that you will receive after the end of the event. Please try to spare a moment to complete it. Your feedback is very much appreciated, and thank you to all those who provided their comments yesterday. And finally, if you want to register for any of the webinars in the series, please get in touch with us, or you can find the details in the latest newsletter from the government property function. And I think that's it for me. I hope you enjoy the session. I hope you find it helpful. I'm looking forward to it. So let's hear from the MEP team. Dave, Chris.
Thanks, Christos.
Thank you.
Right then, it's funny, isn't it, actually? We don't have to explain about fire alarms anymore, do we?
Well, I was
before
thinking...
the session starts. If there's a fire alarm, then we've all got to exit out through the building on the left-hand side. Okay, right, moving on from that frivolity. Welcome, everyone. Dave and I are going to take you through this session. You can see we've got a sort of basic agenda here, but we've got two main things that we wanted to talk to you about today, which is the sort of realistic delivery of decarbonisation, how long it takes, how to think about it with a portfolio, thinking about the strategy of delivery, and also the beginnings of what you need to do to build capacity up within your department, within your organisation, to think about how you are going to actually achieve this, because you know, it's quite a challenge. So Dave and I, if we just click onto the next slide, are with you. You can see pictures of us there. You can see pictures of us here. Dave and I have both been working on the Modern Energy Partners for the last year and a bit. We've both still got the right colour hair, which is great news. But what we've been doing is, in fact, I'll explain that in a minute. We're running 5 bite-sized webinars. This is the second one. It's quite closely linked to the one that we had yesterday, and I'd love it if we could have a show of hands, if that works, of how many people were there yesterday, so that I know whether or not we need to cover certain things. I can see, yeah, so it looks like there's, oh gosh, quite a few. 7, 8, righty-ho. All right, well, so we'll try not to tell you the same stuff again. If it gets boring, then let us know by flagging your hand or something. But we've got 3 more after this. The one that's most closely linked to this will be the one next Friday, so not this Friday, next Friday, which is going to talk about empowerment and the intelligent type of customer. But the other 2 are quite standalone, and we'll give examples of the technical side of things, but also the sub-metering. And they should be quite interesting. Right, so Modern Energy Partners was a programme, a SICE-funded programme, so that's the innovation team at Bayes. It was set up 2 and a bit years ago, and we're in phase 2 at the moment. You can see the size of the prize down at the bottom, but what the challenge was to work collaboratively across government to see whether or not we could understand why decarbonisation wasn't happening at scale, and what needed to be unlocked, what technologies were going to be required, and how it was going to happen. Yes, I should think so. We'll work out how we do that, but we did record it so that it can be shared. The focus of the programme was to learn by doing, so to test out the practicalities of delivering and thinking about how things were done, so that you could then consider how things could be delivered in the future at scale. So we looked at developing consistent, repeatable systems and processes and approaches to things. We did that by developing materials, tools, templates, and we've got all of that, and that hopefully will be launched at some point. We've been working against the next big carbon budget target for the public sector, which is the 50% non-traded carbon emissions, against the 2017 baseline. And I want to draw out that baseline because that is different to the 1990 baseline that all other targets are against. And it's also this non-traded thing, which is about dealing with the way in which you tackle Scope 1 or direct emissions. So that's about fossil fuels and removing that. And there's a reason for that, which I did show yesterday, which is that as we know, the electricity grid is decarbonising. And over time, what we'll see is that fossil fuels by about 26 will actually have a higher carbon rate than electricity. So that's going to have to be the focus of decarbonisation at that point if we're going to get to net zero by 2050. Okay, so moving on, the programme has tackled 3 areas. We've had a programme of deploying consistent appraisals on 24 sites to develop decarbonisation plans. That's down at the bottom right hand side. I'm starting this from the opposite end. We've also looked at how we deploy sub-metering and trying to develop a rapid way to deploy that, testing out how we could get sub-metering installed quickly as well. So we've tested out the HELG framework and all sorts of other different facets to get contractors to help us to do that. And most importantly, we've had 4 sites where we've taken things forward to implementation, and on 3 of those we've actually had things physically installed, and we're now metering and able to see what the difference is. You can see on the left-hand side the size of the samples that we've had from the 3 big departments that we've worked with primarily, MOD, and the NHS, but we've also had Benton Park from HMRC and Cardiff University participating. So we've got a good range and understanding of campus-style sites. I want to put that caveat in. So there's been campus-style sites, but some of those are urban-based, some of them are rural-based. Right. So this is what we've achieved with our 3 sites. That's not very exciting, so we'll move on. But the really exciting thing is about the way that we've had to learn to think about it, bearing in mind that Scope 1 target of defossil fueling. What we found as a general overview is that installing no regrets and energy efficiency is absolutely the right way to go. That tends to cost you about 5% of the total budget to hit your 50%, but it actually gives you between 15 and 20% of the emissions reduction, but it's not the full suite. And actually some of that will be in your Scope 2. So you then need to think about how you improve your building fabric, how you replace your fossil fuel heating system or hot water system as well, or air conditioning system with something which is electrified or potentially hydrogen in the future, or even off a district heat network, but making sure that the district heat network has a low carbon source. Then there's something about making sure that that's incorporated into the heat distribution system and making sure that that fits with the current size of it, that you can get heat to the right places at the right temperature so that the building is warm enough. And then finally, if you've moved everything over to electricity, you've got a whole load of extra electric vehicles on it, you've got quite a lot more demand. Not only are you going to have a higher electricity bill, but there may be some challenges with getting the electricity to you. So there's something about reviewing network constraints and thinking about whether or not on site you can generate some renewables and actually blend or manage the power and heat that you need through storage to make sure that you're not using it at peak times, and that will avoid costs if in the future we move to a time of day tariff. So that's the sort of cycle that we've come up with and we understand, and that's the sort of context of what we've been trying to deploy. So with the deployment, what we've tried to do is we've looked at some of the no regrets measures as well as a little bit more on one of the sites, and we've begun to think about what that looks like. We've also begun to think about what that needs to look like if you're going to scale this. So what realistically do you need to do if you're going to be able to incorporate this across the whole of your department or organisation's portfolio over what will actually become quite a short period of time, because realistically we're looking at 10 years now. So that's what we wanted to talk to you about today, as well as the capability and capacity. So this is a really terrible example. I don't expect you to read all of the lines on the chart. That's the first thing to point out. But really, you know, when you're thinking about this at a portfolio level, you've got a huge number of buildings or operations or activities that you've got to be able to capture. And you've got to be able to understand what you're going to invest in and when, over what time period, and what it's going to give you, what it's going to cost. And so this was just as a starting point to think about, you know, in the past where we've had, you know, at one site and you've got a plan and you might come up with a series of 10 measures and you're choosing where you're going to invest. Actually, you need to have a bit more of a sophisticated system when you start thinking about it at scale. Dave's going to just talk about timelines with you and what that might mean, and then I'll come back to the capability and capacity. Dave, what do you think?
Thank you. Yeah. Hi, everybody. Pleasure to meet you for the first time if I've not met you yesterday. As Chris has said, I'm going to talk you through a bit about a timeline. I am a project manager by trade, so that is my pointy hat that I wear, whereas I refer to Christine as a pointy-hatted scientist type technical person. So that is where we're at. Okay. So from a timeline perspective, mentioned this at session 1 yesterday really with you, but our experience, as Chris has said, that the total timeline for delivery, this is from having the idea right at the beginning to finishing the installation and wrapping up the site and closing down the installation activity, will take a minimum of 2 years. I think the key things that affected the timelines that we saw relate to the decision-making approval process. So please bear that in mind when you're looking at this. You as a department often have complex processes that you have to navigate and manage, and that often requires escalation to senior stakeholders. Our experience working with the MOD and the MOJ are testament to that fact, and getting that through to your accountable executive to make sure you get over whatever hurdles you chase. Just wanted to share kind of observations with you so that when you come to look at this yourself, you can consider what the impacts of how this affects what you're going to do, looking into getting to delivery by 2032, whilst also providing some food for thought for you to enable to look for some efficiency activity. You know, you could do that to improve your processes, and you could do that to speed up your activity and reduce your overall start to end period. So it's stuff to get you kind of thinking. Okay, so next slide. This is an example of a pathway that we produced for you. Just to let you know, Modern Energy Partners love colour, so there's lots of colour coding in all our slides, and we hope to make it easy for you to transmit the colour to the legend, from the legend into the actual activity. So I'm sure Chris will want to jump in here from a technical perspective, but from a delivery perspective, this is an example of one of the key deliverables we produced under Modern Energy Partners as part of our concept design workstream. So you can see there are various activity blocks here that build up from the bottom left up to the top right, and they cover off the activity that needs to be done when it needs to be done to meet your sustainability and your carbon reduction goals. So we usually break these down into 3 specific areas of activity. First one is no regrets in the bottom left hand corner, which is the low-hanging fruit, which you could probably look at doing in the here and now to start you off on your carbon reduction journey, and importantly, it will help you prepare for the next phase of activity. So that's followed then by some interim work and then some final energy intervention phases based on a number of factors linked to your site. So your site very specific, there's the specific type of site, the condition of the site, location of the site. its capability to generate its own renewable power, and this is broken down into the color-coded elements that you can see there on the page, to basically give you a view of what's going on. Just want to call out one caveat. This doesn't include the additional work that we recommend you have a look at to understand what your electrical power capacity is of your site. So that's what Christian referred to recently, understanding what your DNO supply to the site is and whether you have any action to take because of the amount of electricity that you can get to site. But I think it will need including in your planning if you look at it. And another point to mention here, and I'm sure Chris you'll jump in, but we identified when we were doing the concept delivery pathway that there was a kind of natural break and a decision point in the process when the standard CHP plants were getting to the end of their kind of natural life or their allocated life, and that they were due to be retired, and that gave you an ideal opportunity to kind of say, right, actually, normally we'll just replace what we had like we'd like, but is there an alternative available? Chris, do you want to build on that?
Yeah, well, so what we found, and not every single one of these is the same, but what we found is that as we looked at our sample size, that there was a repeatable pattern of the types of things that would be deployed. Not saying that every site isn't bespoke, but what we found is that it was quite useful to look at that and to understand that there were going to be profiles of what you'd want to deploy and when. And of course, there's other things that are influencing that. There's the asset life replacement. So, in some instances, when things come to the end of their life, you can see here on this one, it's quite a good example. We've got the retirement of 2 CHPs. And actually, in this instance, there's a trust-owned one. So I've just given it away. Then there's also the retirement of one that they've got with a contractor, and if you retire things and replace them at the same time, then you're obviously going to benefit from it, but being able to track that across a whole portfolio is quite difficult, so that's why it's important to blend it with asset management. But what we did also find is that up front there were always these things we call no regrets, and programming those in made sense. And so that helps you think about, the different delivery model that you might want to choose. If you can see that you're going to have certain things that will be popping up at certain points in time, it helps you with your planning about how you might address certain things. There are certain technologies that are specific and standalone. So, for example, roof-mounted PV might be specific to the roof and making sure that you've got someone who can incorporate into what you've got. But with the PV carport, it may be that it's very uniform, and you can think about that across the portfolio. So those sorts of things were the sort of influencing factors when we started to think about how you could scale this over a time period with different technologies, as well as the really exciting thing of seeing how it comes together and the fact that it actually interacts quite closely with itself, doesn't it? So you're putting in the PV at the same time as you're taking your CHP out, so that you're making sure that you're generating and that you're going to financially benefit from things. Anyway, I could keep going, but I'm going to stop.
Okay.
Dave, come on, keep going.
Thank you. All right, so what we thought we'd do now is take a couple of these blocks here. So if you can see the BMS recommissioning and the LED lighting piece, and then actually show you what that meant from our perspective in respect of the low-level planning for delivery. So this breaks down the key component parts for that process and went through from actually doing the data discovery and understanding what the site does, how it uses its energy, what kind of energy it uses, what the plans are for the site, developing the concept design, doing the modelling, all the way through the stages, the governance of business cases, tendering, design, and then actual delivery. So you can see there there's quite a lot of activity built into just that one block within the concept delivery pathway. A couple of pointers for you here. So this was a specific class as a Pathfinder program, so it might be a kind of an isolated incident, but we had a joint funding process that we needed to adhere to, which actually meant that we needed to do 2 business cases. But the reason why we wanted to do that is because we were trying to do the prove, do, learn, do kind of activity. So it's how we then not only experience the implementation journey, but capture the key lessons and the key learnings that we wanted to share back with our partners that we've been working with. So you can see there basically that The data discovery piece took us quite a long time to do because this was the first site that we did this activity on. I'm very happy to report that using that do, learn, do process, we've done another 26, 27 of these now. So we're much quicker at doing that. So we can kind of put our hand on our heart and say it's going to take you between 20 and 25 weeks to get that work done. That's with some good site interaction. Talked about the double business cases. I think that's kind of an isolated piece. You may or may not have to deal with that. And then I think just one at the bottom to talk about there, unfortunately we weren't able to progress with the building fabric activity. So the plan was actually to do that as part of the no regrets work, but we were kind of hamstrung by a change in the central approvals process whilst the Ministry of Defence business case was going through its approvals. So that actually put the whole of the programme at risk. So we had to de-scope that activity to protect the funding for tender for the LED and the BMS installation. And you can see at the bottom there, we did also do some telemetry and data submetering installation as well. So we've badged that as a piece of work that we would recommend that you do, not only to better understand your site, but it gives you a really good avenue of ensuring that your benefits realization can be kind of tracked and done. So that is at one set of level. So you've got the concept pathway that's a site. This is one of the building blocks. The next slide that we've got, we actually showed yesterday, but this we've gone from right at the low level and one individual piece of work right up to the top level, where it's your overall portfolio of programming work that you need to do if you're looking at getting this done by 2032. So we asked ourselves a question, you know, if you want to get this done by that time, when do you need to start? And like I said yesterday, we think that the answer is now. And, you know, it sounds ludicrous of me to say that, but based on the examples and the understanding that we have and we know and the timelines it takes to get things done, if you look at this picture here, it gives you a six-phasing approach for a number of sites within each of the phases with 3 elements of intervention work, as we've said. And before you know it, you've run out of time to get all that delivered. So you can see that there's just one concept pathway up front. So we're hoping that this concept pathway is a one-off activity that will give you the options then to say, right, I'm going to do this bit of intervention here, I'm going to do this bit of intervention in 4 years' time, as we've kind of mentioned. So that gives us onto the next slide about delivery routes. So here's a kind of summary of our experiences that we have on Modern Energy Partners. So we just wanted to share those with you so you can start considering the overall planning. I would definitely consider how you're going to ramp up your existing and possibly develop new routes to enable you to deliver at scale. You know, the pace that we're seeing that you will need to adopt is going to be quite a big ask for any organization to adopt, never mind a specific delivery partner or a delivery procurement route that you already have in place. We've confirmed that when we touched on the length and the complexity previously, and a key one here about which we're going to touch about in a little bit more shortly, about what the processes and the stakeholders you'll need to involve and who you'll need to use to help you deliver this work, and are they the right set of colleagues with the right skill set. We've had it drummed into us to always ask the value for money question and protecting the public purse. One thing to touch about here is about, you know, are there any opportunities for you to combine works? I mentioned this yesterday, so I'll cover it again. Are there any BAU or planned maintenance activities that you could take advantage of? Like we said before, is there anything coming up to retirement from an asset perspective that you can actually join in on? And obviously you can talk quite pointedly to your delivery routes to say, right, we're going to do 10 of these, 20 of these. Come on, you can get a better price than that, can't you? As always, there's always the, you know, are we going to do this at scale? It's going to be a lot more complex than we thought it was going to be. Question that I would ask you, do you have or need to invoke or have the capacity to deliver this using multiple delivery routes? You may have a number of options available to you. You may want to do a blended approach there, and there's definitely an opportunity to drive scalable value for money, as I've said. So from like a strategic planning perspective, we pulled this together in a nice kind of picture, and we think these are some of the key pointers that you want to consider. So, and I don't think this applies just at a strategy level. I personally believe it applies to each of the levels of program management. So your strategy, your portfolio, your program, and then your project. I think if you can ask yourself these questions and you can come up with a model that helps you deliver that, I think you're standing yourself in a good stead. Obviously, I'm looking at this from a project manager perspective, but Chris, if there's anything you want to specifically add and call out from a technical perspective?
Well, I mean, so I think from a sort of helicopter view, the main thing that we've identified is that there's lots of systematic barriers that prevent decarbonisation from happening at scale. That's partly because it's never really had to before. And so, you know, over the next time period, there's quite a challenge to try and make sure that each one of these elements is in place and is going to be able to deliver. And I think, I mean, my general reflection is that the technical aspect is one. We know that there's a solution there. We don't know that it's necessarily going to be able to pay itself back, and so getting it through a business case is going to be quite challenging. And Dave talked about that yesterday. You know, you've just heard about how building fabric improvements fell out. But actually, if you've got to do this at a level, you need to have a whole load of people, and you've got to have the monitoring processes and the systems in place to be able to know and understand that you're going to deliver on track or you're behind track, and what you're going to do next. And so each one of these elements needs to reflect what needs to be done at scale rather than at a lesser level. And you know, when we started working with some of the departments, you know, the enthusiasm and the positivity of the people we're working with is amazing. The effort that they put in to try and get things done. But what we came to realise is that it's not any one individual that can do this. It's the whole organisation, and that sort of perfectly segues over into what I was going to talk about next, which is the unless Dave, you've got anything you want me to say?
Nope.
No? Okay, go back. So what we saw is this amazing carbon fluency in the teams that we were working with, but actually what we think is it's got to become business as usual. And we gave the example yesterday of, you know, we need to get to a point where everyone thinks about carbon as they do about health and safety, so that it's everyone's role. Now we can go to the next slide. This is a very noddy diagram. It's nothing like Dave's sophisticated diagrams, but this was what we tried to carve out about the different types of people that we were involved in, and the level of effort that we saw that they had to input to get a project through. So it's not saying this is the right proportion, but it's what we saw and experienced, and we appreciate that every organisation is delivered differently or set up differently. So we obviously worked with the central teams, which were responsible for sustainability, but actually, I mean, they put an immense amount of effort in, but in reality, going forwards, they can't do it all. So then we started thinking, well, where else does the effort need to come from? And there is an element of having, as well as a strategy team, someone that's responsible, that technically knows the know-how of how to deliver. So can transfer the monitoring, the reporting into something which is a bit more practical and understand what the practical solutions are. And there's a role there to be had to make sure that the strategy team that are thinking about what needs to happen next have got the right information. On the ground, though, the projects that we delivered were all managed by project managers who were not part of the sustainability or the carbon team. And whilst they were absolutely fantastic, they had very little awareness or carbon fluency about what we were trying to achieve. They knew and understand the construction process, which was fantastic because they were able to lead us through that. But actually, you know, they haven't done masses of lighting replacements. They haven't done loads of heat pumps. So their weakness is about understanding that technical support. The procurement team, you know, one of the things that became quite apparent is that we were using current and existing delivery routes. And some of the ways in which contracts are set up probably don't serve this ability to be able to decarbonise in the future. So you may be locked into something that you're agreed to just get certain volumes of heat at a certain price or certain power. You might be in a contract which is an FM contract which has only got a certain level of capacity to deliver a certain number of projects over a year. So there are lots of different issues that your procurement team need to think about, not just incorporating sustainability into a procurement framework. And then of course there's this objective of understanding what's going on site and making sure that it's operational, that it's delivering the carbon that's expected to. And we had site agents who potentially weren't actually energy managers who were trying to help us. And the second point to make is that they weren't actually tasked to do it. So they were doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. So there's something about having roles and responsibilities as well as the capability and capacity to do this. Next slide, please. So I think that gives you a general view. That's just a repeat of what we had on the previous slide. But if we just slip onto the next slide, I had a go at trying to think about what the skills were for each of these different categories that I've just talked about. And as you can see, I decided to tick every box, which is really not very helpful at all. But I came to the point that they needed to be the same. They needed to have some knowledge, but the knowledge that they had in each of these areas is different. And I think it's really important to specify that. So I've had a go at trying to give some examples of why it's different. So here we go. We've got our same categories on the left-hand side: policy understanding, strategic understanding, technical understanding, and evaluation of financial understanding. Lots and lots of understandings. But at the policy level, what is the policy framework that they've got to respond to? What have they got to report to? What's the strategic understanding about how that fits across the departmental organisation, and how is that going to then link in to the technical thing that's going to be delivered? And of course, how is that then going to be evaluated and appraised? And I came up with a view that actually your central team and your delivery team don't have masses of differences, but actually there's something about your central team having much more of an understanding of the policy and how to implement it. But the delivery team need to be the practical guys that know and understand how that's going to interlink. And the same with technologies. What technologies are going to contribute to what comes from the delivery team, whereas the central team just need to know that there are technologies that are going to make sure that they're going to deliver those savings. So you can begin to see the nuance. I think it's better with the next one. Okay, so here we go. So everyone needs to have a general understanding of policy, and I think that that's fair. And probably the strategic understanding as well of where the department or the organisation needs to go. But actually, in reality, on a site-by-site basis, your energy manager needs to understand what they're targeting, how often they've got to report, and what's going on, what they're looking for, and what improvements they're expected to make. And actually, it would be really good for them to know on a monetary basis what that means as well, because that gives them an understanding of what they're aspiring for, not only on a carbon basis, but how they're fitting into the general budgeting and delivery of the whole organisational activity. Your procurement guy, he needs to know and understand the policy and strategic understanding, but he also needs to know what level of delivery is going to be required. So what sort of budgets are going to get thrown at this over the time period, so that he can make sure that he structures the right contracts, that he thinks about who and what type of contracts are going to be delivered, because of course that's linked to the financial understanding of what financial routes, commercial routes and contracting could he apply to it, and what options are open to him. So again, he needs to have that understanding of what you're going to deliver, but he's got to apply it. She might have to apply it in a different way. Finally, our project managers. Thank you. I know I forget these things. Please remind me if I keep going on like that. So project management for delivery. So the final point to make is that actually, of course, they really do need to know and understand what the technical solutions are. They need to understand about how they're actually going to fit, what the common pitfalls are with those technologies. So, understanding what's best practice in those areas, what they should be looking out for. and sharing the experiences across other project managers who are delivering similar technologies. And of course, they're overseeing contractors, or they may well be overseeing contractors, so they also need to be able to quiz and intelligently challenge what they've got. And if they don't have that education and that understanding of the technology that they're working at or looking at installing, they won't be able to.
Chris, and just from a PM perspective, when you're down in the weeds of delivery, I think the viewpoint, I would definitely say that it's key that the people that you're relying on, I think is a word here, relying on to get that done for you, have the right skill set. It's part of the role. We've had a couple of examples where we're going to work with this person on this site. They're fantastic, but then you very quickly realise the question that they've been asked is, and can you just do this? And can you just do this turns into 80% of the role. So I think it's really important to understand that up front and not underplay the amount of time, work and commitment it takes. And that goes with having the right span of control as well, to be able to control all the relevant stakeholders on site, as well as working with whoever it is that's delivering this work for you.
Yeah. And so actually I've just seen a really good question come in as well, which I know we're supposed to do Q&A in a minute, but I think it's quite pertinent to this slide, is we did come across each one of the organisations that we've worked with have had different nuances about how to manage site by site energy management. So having someone responsible on the site to be able to monitor and manage the energy. And in both instances where we've worked with the large departments, it's come down to actually making sure that there is an individual that is tasked to do it, whether they are part of the organisation or whether they're part of the outsourced facilities management contractors. They need to be tasked, and actually at the moment that's not happening. So whilst we experienced in the world of MOD, their area utility managers, their job role is about looking at energy consumption, but it isn't what we would expect them to be doing. And so they're doing what they're asked to do, but it's not what's actually required on the ground. And similarly, within the MOJ, they had a fantastic suite of very committed people, but again, the tasking wasn't there. So it's really important to make sure that you've got the roles and responsibilities either defined very clearly within the organisation, or that's specifically outsourced, but it is a known task that you need to have a certain number of activities done, because you don't just want it to be one energy manager that's covering 15 different sites or more than that, and not actually doing this MMT on site. And it doesn't need to be a full-time role, but it just needs to be someone who's on site, who knows what they're looking at and is looking at it very regularly.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think, don't draw the line at the end of the implementation. I think there's a role for them to then take on throughout the operational piece of it as well. So it's not just a transient role of coming in and getting the job done. You might want to use a different person to do that, which it's probably that you'll have to evolve the person that's there looking after the building and doing the facilities management to include that, as well as ongoing sustainability pieces.
Yeah. And we'll start rapping about this, but there is something about making sure that as things are delivered, there's a good transference of knowledge and insight from the delivery team to whoever is going to be managing it on site, and making sure that they understand and know how they're going to operate it. And shamefully, we've come across all sorts of pieces of technology that have been installed that no one has got responsibility for looking after, and therefore it's not operational. We've even come across equipment that's been installed and never been operated. And so that's really sad to see, and it's all about making sure that there's the right capability, competency, but people are tasked appropriately. And I think within the health and safety world, we do make sure that they are tasked appropriately, and people have roles and responsibilities that they report on a regular basis about what they're being asked to do. and in this instance, I think we need to get to that point, because we're not quite there yet. Although I could be wrong, and I know that there are some exemplars. And coming back to where we started, the people that we worked with were amazing. They really wanted to do this. They went out of their way, they worked extra hours, and their contribution made the difference for what we were trying to do. So if any of them are on this call, thank you. Right then, with a very, very long talk through that slide, we're on to our summary, which I think probably tells you everything that you already know.